There are films that arrive in theaters with the quiet confidence of any other release projected onto the screen, listed on the marquee, and ready to begin their theatrical lives. And then there are the strange ones. The action movies that slip into circulation only to be pulled away almost immediately, leaving behind a trail of confusion, speculation, and silence. These aren't the victims of scandal or controversy. They aren't pulled because of lawsuits, public backlash, or any dramatic event. Instead, they vanish without a whisper, as if someone behind the curtain decided the world shouldn't see them, not then, and perhaps not ever. Across the decades, Hollywood has quietly created its own graveyard of theatrical disappearances. Movies that premiered on a Friday and were gone by Sunday. Titles that played a single screening before being yanked. And projects that survived production hell only to be buried by the very system meant to showcase them. Theater managers recall sudden orders to remove films from rotation. Distributors refuse to give clear answers. Studios stay silent, and in that silence, a deeper mystery takes shape. Who made these decisions, and what were they trying to hide? Some of these films were born from creative battles. Others collapsed under financial pressure. A few may have threatened legal complications that studios raced to avoid. And some simply performed so poorly in their first hours on screen that companies panicked and erased them before the numbers could make headlines. Whatever the cause, each disappearance forms part of a larger pattern. A series of quiet removals that turned these action movies into theatrical phantoms. Tonight, we reopen these lost files. We revisit the premieres that barely happened, the screenings witnessed by only a handful of people, and the films whose theatrical fates were rewritten in total secrecy. This is a journey into the hidden side of Hollywood distribution, a world where decisions are made silently, consequences vanish instantly, and entire releases can be undone with a single phone call. These are the action movies pulled from theaters without explanation, and the stories they tried not to leave behind. Fact 1. Liberty and Bash, 1989. When Liberty and Bash crept into a handful of theaters in 1989, almost no one realized it happened, and fewer still understood why it disappeared so quickly. The film's journey had been rocky long before it reached the projection booth. Rewrites mid-shoot, creative disagreements, and producers fighting over the final tone. By the time the movie was printed and shipped, the studio had already lost confidence in it. But the true mystery began after release. Several theaters reported receiving sudden instructions to pull the film before its first week ended. No incident occurred, no complaints were logged, no news outlets covered anything unusual. It was simply removed. Behind closed doors, whispers circulated that the studio didn't want poor box office numbers on record while negotiating future deals. Others believed the distributors feared contractual penalties tied to performance metrics. Whatever the reason, Liberty and Bash ended up feeling like a project the system tried to erase, leaving only a brief and blurry presence in the world of theatrical exhibition. Fact 2. Chain of Command 1994. For an action star like Michael Dudikoff, a theatrical release usually meant dependable turnout from his loyal fan base. Yet Chain of Command experienced one of the most abrupt withdrawals of the mid-90 seconds. Posters arrived late. Promotional materials were sparse. Some regions announced showtimes only to remove them days or even hours later. Employees at several theaters claimed they received direct calls instructing them to take the film down without further clarification. Industry rumors suggested fierce disputes between rights holders and the domestic distributor. Licensing conflicts may have emerged at the worst possible moment, causing the film to be technically released, but practically yanked before audiences could attend. Others speculated that the studio saw the early numbers and panicked, choosing to abandon the theatrical push in favor of the far more lucrative home video market. In the end, the movie's presence in theaters was so faint that many action fans only learned it had premiered at all years after the fact. Fact 3. Steel. Justice o Mianowa Sute Obsec Shishapta. Marketed as a gritty revenge thriller with explosive set pieces, Steel Justice appeared poised for a modestly successful limited release. But instead of building momentum, the movie's theatrical life evaporated almost instantly. Within days of opening, screenings were canceled, and its listings quietly vanished from local newspapers. The studio offered no press statements, and publicists avoided discussing the film altogether. Insiders pointed to disastrous test screenings that shook the studio's confidence. Executives reportedly feared the film would drag down their slate of upcoming releases if negative word of mouth spread. Some also believed that internal restructuring within the company forced smaller projects, especially mid-tier action titles, onto the chopping block. Whatever the truth, Steel Justice was removed so quickly and so quietly that its theatrical run became more rumor than reality. Only a tiny number of viewers ever saw it in a cinema, making it one of the most obscure, released, but vanished films of its decade. Fact 4. Stick Fighter, 1990. Stick Fighter slipped into theaters with barely a spark of attention, but the speed at which it was pulled made the release feel almost accidental. Many moviegoers never knew it premiered at all. Some theaters reported that they received the reels late, screened the film once or twice, and then were unexpectedly told to remove it from their schedules. No formal recall notice, no explanation, just a quiet directive. Behind the scenes, murmurings suggested the issue stemmed from quality concerns, specifically inconsistent print transfers that caused projection problems during early showings. Others claimed the distributor had already set its sights on the home video market and realized that a theatrical run might damage sales if critics noticed the film's flaws. The result was a vanishing act so abrupt that Stick Fighter became one of those titles spoken about like a sighting, technically released, practically unseen, and remembered mostly by the few who caught it before it disappeared. Fact 5. The Base, 1999. When The Base arrived in theaters, it appeared to be another straightforward military action release. But almost immediately, theater managers across various regions received sudden, quiet instructions to remove it from rotation. Some hadn't even finished its first weekend run. Others reported that the film was replaced mid-week without any clarification from the distributor. The silence surrounding the recall only amplified speculation. Some insiders pointed to unresolved legal complications concerning the story's rights issues that allegedly surfaced right as the film reached the public. Another theory suggested that early box office projections were so dismal that the studio decided it was cheaper to cut the theatrical rollout entirely. Whatever the behind-the-scenes turmoil was, The Base ended up being swept from theaters almost instantly, reappearing swiftly on video shelves as if that had been the real plan all along. Fact 6. Diplomatic Siege, 1999. With recognizable names like Peter Weller and Daryl Hannah, Diplomatic Siege should have enjoyed a standard limited release. Instead, it became one of the decade's most curious theatrical disappearances. In several markets, the film was advertised but never shown. In others, it premiered for a single weekend before the distributor abruptly halted screenings. Managers reported receiving terse instructions. Stop showing the film, send the reels back. No reason given. Whispers from industry insiders suggested a creative clash over the film's final cut. Producers reportedly delivered a version the studio found difficult to market, and neither side was willing to make the changes demanded. Rather than continue pushing a release mired in conflict, the distributor seemingly chose the easiest exit, pull the film quietly, and move on. As a result, Diplomatic Siege became a rare example of a film that technically premiered, yet almost no one had the chance to see in an actual theater. Fact 2. Detention. Tortusinde. Autre. Detention. Featuring Dolph Lundgren as a hardened instructor caught in a violent school takeover, should have been a solid entry in early 2000s action cinema. Instead, it became a near-invisible theatrical ghost. In several regions, the film opened quietly, only to be pulled before the standard weekly cycle even finished. Some theaters screened it for a day or two. Others reported that scheduled showtimes were abruptly canceled without warning. The sudden disappearance raised immediate questions. Why release a film, only to erase it almost instantly? People close to the distribution chain later suggested that the release may have been a contractual formality designed solely to fulfill international market requirements. Once those obligations were met, there was no incentive for the studio to keep the film on screens. Other whispers pointed to dismal audience reactions from early showings, scores so low that distributors allegedly panicked, choosing to retreat before negative word of mouth could spread. Whatever the real reason, Detention became one of those titles that technically played in theaters, yet remained unseen by almost everyone who might have gone looking for it. Fact 8. Deadly Prey, 1987. Today, Deadly Prey stands as a cult classic in the world of low-budget action, but its original theatrical release was a chaotic, short-lived event clouded in confusion. Newspaper listings promised a limited run, yet mid-week the film vanished from schedules with no announcement. Theater managers recalled receiving vague instructions to stop screenings with no justification attached. Some claimed the film prints arrived late or damaged. Others said they simply never received complete reels to continue programming. Behind these bizarre inconsistencies may have been a more serious problem: financial turmoil within the production company. If early attendance failed to meet even the smallest projections, the distributor would have needed to pay out of pocket to keep the movie on screens, a cost they may not have been able to afford. Combined with rumors of disorganization during distribution, the abrupt withdrawal turned Deadly Prey into a theatrical ghost story, a film that hit the big screen in theory, yet slipped through the cracks before audiences could experience it. Fact 9. American Ninja V. 1997. As part of a well-known franchise, American Ninja 5 should have had a straightforward, if modest, theatrical rollout. Instead, it became one of the franchise's most perplexing entries, a film that premiered in select territories only to be pulled almost immediately. In some areas, theaters listed showtimes but never screened it at all. In others, the film was shown briefly before being replaced by unrelated titles. Confusion grew when fans realized that marketing materials were present, but the movie itself was not. The mystery deepened when reports surfaced, suggesting the film was never originally intended to be an American Ninja installment. It was allegedly rebranded at the 11th hour to capitalize on the franchise name. This last-minute shift may have triggered licensing issues or disagreements between rights holders, forcing the withdrawal until legal concerns could be addressed, or quietly shelving the release to avoid confrontation altogether. Ultimately, the film found its home on video, leaving behind a theatrical run so fragmented and brief that many fans assumed it never reached cinemas in the first place. Fact 10. Rapid Fire, 1992. Although Rapid Fire would later gain recognition as one of Brandon Lee's defining roles, its theatrical journey in certain regions was strangely disrupted. Reports from several markets suggest that the film was pulled far earlier than planned, sometimes disappearing from schedules mid-week without any studio explanation. For a rising star like Lee, this kind of abrupt withdrawal felt out of place, especially given the film's strong action pedigree and commercial potential. Insiders speculated that the sudden removals stemmed from uncertainty within the studio regarding how aggressively to push the film, particularly amid sensitive discussions surrounding Lee's career and public image. Others believed the withdrawal had less to do with the movie itself and more with behind-the-scenes disputes between international distributors and domestic partners, creating a tangled web of rights issues. Whatever the truth, these early disappearances left Rapid Fire with an uneven theatrical footprint, fully released in some areas, mysteriously absent in others, and remembered as a film whose rollout never quite matched its promise. Fact 11. Extreme Justice, 1993. Extreme Justice entered the early 90 seconds with a provocative premise: an undercover unit operating outside the law, and a cast with enough presence to attract genre fans. Yet its theatrical appearance was shockingly brief. In multiple cities, the film was advertised only to vanish before opening weekend concluded. Other regions received posters and promotional kits, but the movie never screened at all. No official cancellation was announced, and no replacement marketing filled the void. It was as if the film had been erased mid-launch. Rumors circulated that the studio grew nervous about the film's themes, fearing controversy given real-world tensions involving police conduct at the time. Executives reportedly worried that negative attention could spill over onto other titles in the studio's pipeline. Instead of risking public scrutiny, the decision appeared to be a quiet retreat, a silent recall executed before the film could attract headlines. Extreme Justice ultimately found a modest audience on cable and home video, but its theatrical disappearance remains one of the most enigmatic choices of its era. Fact 12. Martial Outlaw 1993. With Jeff Wincott at the height of his popularity in the martial arts video market, Martial Outlaw seemed positioned for a compact but successful limited release. Instead, its presence in theaters evaporated almost instantly. Several exhibitors reported receiving late or incomplete film shipments. Others said that after only a handful of screenings, instructions arrived, telling them to halt all showings with immediate effect. No clarification followed, leaving theater staff confused about whether the issue was technical, legal, or something more complicated. Speculation behind the scenes pointed to financial instability within the distribution company. There were murmurs that they struggled to pay for theater bookings and promotional commitments, leading to a discreet withdrawal before debts could accumulate. Another theory suggested disputes between producers and distributors over the final cut, with each side unwilling to compromise. Whatever the cause, the film's theatrical life flickered out before it could gain traction, turning Martial Outlaw into yet another action title whose big-screen debut existed only in fragmented, near-invisible glimpses. Fact 13. Hollow Point 1996. With a cast featuring Thomas Ian Griffith and Donald Sutherland, Hollow Point seemed poised for more attention than it ultimately received. Instead of building momentum, the film's release evaporated almost immediately. In several markets, it screened briefly, sometimes only for a single weekend, before theaters were instructed to remove it from rotation. Other regions reported receiving promotional materials but never got the film itself, creating a strange disconnect between advertising and reality. Those close to the production later hinted that the distributor was undergoing significant financial strain during the release window. Commitments to higher-profile titles forced the company to make tough decisions, and mid-tier action films were the first to be sacrificed. There were also murmurs that rival studios pressured exhibitors to clear space for blockbuster releases, pushing Hollow Point out without negotiation. Regardless of the internal politics, the film's theatrical run was so faint that it barely left a footprint, becoming one of the decade's most obscure withdrawals. Fact 14. U.S. Seals, 2000. U.S. Seals arrived during a period when military-themed action movies were seeing renewed interest, yet its theatrical rollout was shockingly short-lived. In many places, the film was shown only once or twice before suddenly disappearing from schedules. Some theater managers claimed they were told to hold the reels for pickup, while others said the film never even reached the projection booth despite being advertised. The abruptness of the recall left audiences confused and exhibitors without answers. Industry speculation pointed to potential legal disputes involving certain action sequences rumored to resemble material from an international production. Whether the concern was copyright-related or simply fear of public scrutiny, the distributor seemed intent on minimizing attention. By pulling the film quietly and quickly, the studio effectively prevented any controversy from taking shape. As a result, U.S. Seals shifted almost instantly to home video, where it lived out its life cycle without the theatrical exposure it was initially promised. Fact 15. The Silencers 1996. Marketed as a high-energy blend of action and sci-fi conspiracy, The Silencers had the potential to appeal to fans of both genres. Yet its theatrical presence flickered out so quickly that many assumed it had gone straight to video. Reports suggest that some theaters received the film prints only to be told to return them before opening day. Others screened it briefly before having the title pulled mid-week, removing all trace of it from marquees and schedules. Sources close to the production claimed the film suffered from deep creative disagreements between the director and studio executives. Debates over tone, whether it should lean into gritty action or embrace its sci-fi eccentricity, left the studio unconvinced about committing to a proper theatrical run. In the end, the simplest solution was also the quietest. withdraw the film before it attracted attention. What remained was a release so fragmented and fleeting that the silencers became one of the most mysterious, blink-and-miss theatrical events of the 90 seconds. Bonus fact: Executive Decision, 1996. Before Executive Decision became known as a polished, big-budget action thriller featuring Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal, it experienced an unusual and little-discussed anomaly during its early rollout. In several select preview markets, the film debuted on a Friday night only to be abruptly withdrawn within 24 hours. Audience members who attended those rare first screenings walked out unaware that they had just seen a version of the movie that would effectively vanish before the broader public ever encountered it. Theaters reported receiving sudden instructions to halt all upcoming showings and return the prints immediately. No justification was provided. Managers assumed a technical failure or misprinted reel, until replacement prints arrived, featuring subtle but noticeable changes. This fueled speculation that the studio had reacted to internal concerns about continuity, pacing, or perhaps a specific sequence involving military protocols. Some insiders even suggested that government consultants flagged inaccuracies during last-minute reviews, prompting the studio to quietly adjust the film before its nationwide release. A more mundane theory circulated too. A batch of early prints may have had flawed audio masters or synchronization issues severe enough to require an emergency swap. But the silence surrounding the withdrawal and the speed with which the early version disappeared gave the event an aura of something deliberately hidden. Unlike smaller action films, this was a major release with a wide marketing push. Pulling it in even a few markets was highly unusual. The mystery remains largely undocumented, overshadowed by the film's later success. Yet those first preview screenings stand as a peculiar footnote, an alternate version of Executive Decision that flickered briefly across a handful of screens before being replaced, leaving no official record and only scattered memories from the few who witnessed it. If you followed this journey through 15 vanished releases and one extraordinary bonus case, you now know just how easily a film can slip into the shadows, erased not by scandal, but by silence. Hollywood is filled with stories like these, hidden behind closed doors, buried in contracts, or lost in decisions made overnight. And every disappearance leaves a trail of unanswered questions waiting to be uncovered. If these mysteries intrigue you, stay with us. There are countless more action films, lost cuts, buried premieres, and forgotten releases still left to explore. Tell us which story surprised you the most, and which hidden chapter of Hollywood's past you want to open next. We'll keep digging into the secrets they never meant for you to see.